It really is an honor to be here today. I am truly, truly excited. I want to thank first Alyssa for inviting me. And I also want to thank Joe. I know he's out today, but he really helped with preparing me. And also Marva and the AV team, really getting me ready for today. So I just really appreciate being here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing this. Excellent. Most of my creative life, I've done freelance work as a digital artist, and I've typically created eye candy for websites, along with filming and editing short documentaries for various nonprofit organizations. Much of my work is in the distant past. I had an opportunity to work for Scholastic. I've done documentaries for various youth groups throughout Delaware County. Chester Eastside Ministries used to be one of those organizations. And I see Miss Seeley here, Miss Carol Seeley, we go way back. You know, although I love digital art, I still enjoy traditional painting. And so, you know, recently when I completed a master's in theology, specifically in theology and the arts at United Seminary of the Twin Cities, while attending there, I became interested in apocalyptic illuminated manuscripts as a source of inspiration for my paintings. The style of painting that I used here was inspired by two apocalyptic illuminated manuscripts. I titled this piece, if I remember things correctly, I titled it as Paul's Chaotic Descent into Death. I know that's a very uplifting title, but the painting was done as part of my arts practicum. It takes the viewer on a visual journey through Paul's eschatological transformation as he wrestles with the finality of death. Various decorative elements in my painting were inspired also by these two illuminated manuscripts. The first is the 10th century Morgan Beatus, inspired by a commentary written by the Saint Beatus of Libana. The other is the 14th century manuscript called the Cloister's Apocalypse, inspired by a number of popular commentaries in the 13th century. The apocalyptic manuscripts have become a key interest of mine, probably due to my upbringing. I grew up as a preacher's kid. More specifically, I grew up as an evangelical Pentecostal preacher's kid. Now, although my background is as an evangelical Pentecostal, please understand I am very aware of the fact that I am at a UU church, so I don't want you to worry. In preparation for this talk, you should know that Joe vetted me well. He agreed that even though I speak fluently in glossolalia tongues, I will not demonstrate that activity today. In this picture, that's me in the dress, in the white dress with a forced smile. I did not like dresses. I still don't like dresses. But so the only Pentecostally thing I'm permitted to do today is talk, so that's what I'm going to do. So what is it that I want to talk about? I want to talk about the apocalyptic imagination. The apocalyptic imagination. I want to talk about what it is and why we should not dismiss it. My interest in apocalyptic imagination comes from a very personal place. As I explained earlier, I was raised as an evangelical. When I was a preteen, I would have these recurring dreams that involved the sudden disappearance of my parents. One dream I had, actually my mother is here today, so this is well censored, I promise, Mom. One dream I had involved my parents driving across what seemed to be a long bridge with very little railing on either side. In this dream, I was always in the back seat. The sky would be eerie and dark without a moon or a sun. During the ride, at some point, I would notice that my parents were silent and hadn't looked back at me, not even once. I would then feel this strong need to gain their attention and to see their faces. And just as I would lean forward to gain their attention, they would disappear. In terror, I would panic in the back seat, unable to reach the steering wheel or the brakes as the car drove off the side of the bridge. Now, you can understand why I hated this dream. It was more of a nightmare than a dream. I would feel the sensation of falling as I headed towards some type of darkness. Then I'd wake up in horror. Now, don't worry, I don't have nightmares like this anymore. What made this nightmare even more terrifying is that I had been taught to believe in a doctrine called the rapture. For those unfamiliar with this belief, the rapture refers to the second coming of Jesus Christ. The idea is that God will snatch up all of his chosen believers into paradise, while all others are left behind to suffer punishments on earth until the final judgment. So in my nightmare, when my parents disappeared, I understood myself as being left behind, not just by my parents, but by God. This doctrine called the rapture is inspired by the epistle known as 1 Thessalonians. It's one of Apostle Paul's earliest letters of record. In fact, many scholars believe that 1 Thessalonians is the earliest dated document of the New Testament canon, written sometime around 50 CE. This means it was likely written about 20 years before the first synoptic gospel was ever written. This also means it provides one of the earliest glimpses into the beliefs held by the first generation of Christ believers before they were labeled Christian. In chapter 4 of 1 Thessalonians, Paul is under great pressure. It's been almost 20 years since the proclaimed death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Some Christ believers have accepted the death of Jesus and go on with their daily lives. But there are others who believe that the resurrected Jesus will return to prove his messianic status and power. Yet as days turn into weeks and weeks into months and months into years and years into possibly decades, the budding church community in Thessalonica appears to have become worried. You see, some of their members have died waiting for Jesus. So Paul realizes that their worry could turn into doubt, which could grow into a serious problem. So he insists that Jesus will return in the clouds soon, even in their lifetime. He also promises them that those Christ believers who have died will be resurrected. Now, I'm not trying to prosecute the rapture doctrine, but please understand that things did not work out the way that Paul had hoped. And to this day, there are many, many Christians who are still waiting for this promise to come to pass. I know because I grew up with them. This hope of escaping the world soon to be destroyed by God is what can be described as an apocalyptic imagination. I think one of the reasons this belief may seem so startling to so many within the US is because this belief was not as on the surface prior to the advent of the internet. Let's recall how in 2011 in America, the news media and the internet were in an uproar over the apocalyptic imagination of a man named Harold Camping. He would become evidence of a growing trend on the internet. His doomsday prediction about the second coming of Jesus Christ and the end of the world had gone viral. He preached that he had received a special revelation from God. On his radio show called The Open Forum, he insisted that Jesus was returning on May 21st to save his believers, and that the universe and all those who didn't believe would be destroyed by God's wrath. Does this sound familiar? His followers would use social media to spread his vision. Now, the reason he insisted so strongly that May 21st would be the day that the world would end is because he had made a failed prediction in 1994. So this second prediction in 2011 was supposedly a correction. Camping was certain he had gotten it right this time. His followers were terrified, naturally, and they worked hard to warn everyone about God's judgment on May 21st. Spending their last dollars, quitting their jobs, and cutting off people in their lives that did not agree with them. The internet was on fire, waiting to see how May 21st would turn out. Now, suffice it to say that May 21st would come and go without any major event taking place. There was no catastrophic earthquake. Jesus did not come down from the sky, and all of the non-believers continued to work, shop, eat, and sleep. The outcome for Harold Camping's followers was devastating, to say the least. Camping ended up reluctantly apologizing for being wrong about his prediction, but the damage was done. When he died, he left behind hundreds and arguably thousands of people who believed him. Many of them had quite literally given up everything in hopes of gaining everything, only to end up with nothing. Unfortunately, apocalyptic imagination has a tendency to run wild, shaping notorious persons like David Koresh in Texas, whose standoff with the government and death would in turn inspire the likes of Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma, who would later murder and harm hundreds of people. It pains me to say that I once embraced this idea of escaping the world. See, I was taught to hate the world because although we were in the world, we were not to be of it. But my lived experience has taught me that escapism is only best for brief periods of time. For example, escapism is best for a 3-day trip to the beach or spending quiet time with my canvas and paints. Escapism is not best when trying to attain justice in the world. Unfortunately, the rapture doctrine also taught me that there was no point in substantively working toward making the world a better place because, well, God had other plans. While on my journey, though, through seminary, I realized that I wanted to let go of the apocalyptic imagination, but I wasn't sure what to replace it with. Then I learned about a new kind of imagination while in spiritual formations class. It was called moral imagination. A whole new world opened up to me when I was introduced to moral imagination. The biggest difference between apocalyptic imagination and versus moral imagination is that apocalyptic imagination sees change as a sign of corruption. It sees demographic changes as inherently evil, not as beneficial. It sees economic change as a threat, not as an opportunity for innovation. It is linear in how it operates. It seeks to escape a changing world. But moral imagination is cyclical in how it operates. Its goal is to recall the past so that it might make better choices in the present and thereby improve the future. Moral imagination does not hate the world. It accepts the world as it is. It accepts that the world will have good times and bad times, and that this cycle of change is a key attribute of the universe and of our biology. Moral imagination understands that there is always the probability that today's choices might have to change tomorrow. It is like water. It is malleable. Moral imagination doesn't fight the reality of change, it respects it. I guess what I am trying to say is that America needs a moral imagination. We need to put away our nightmares so that we can dream dreams once again. I want to close out this talk with an excerpt from the late Octavia Butler's book called Parable of the Sower. The reason this book means so much to me is because it may be one of the most relevant readings for our present time in America. For those who are not familiar with it, Parable of the Sower is a dystopian futurist novel. The main character is a teen named Lauren, who lives in the year 2024. I told you it was relevant. Climate change has ravaged the world, leading to a rapid social and economic decline. In the book, she and her family reside in a barricaded neighborhood that protects itself from the outside world, which is falling apart across the US. Lauren's father is the pastor and leader of the community they live in. He tries to keep everyone disciplined and prepared for the worst. Still, Lauren notices that her father and the other adults around her seem unwilling to dream beyond the walls they have built. In her private journal, she voices her frustration and she develops a personal religion that she calls Earth Seed. Her secret faith helps her to cope with the frequent changes taking place. So in her journal, she writes, "Is any of this real? Dangerous question. After all, if it's real, why doesn't anyone else know about it? Everyone knows that change is inevitable. From the second law of thermodynamics to Darwinian evolution, from Buddhism's insistence that nothing is permanent and all suffering results from our delusions of permanence, to the third chapter of Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season. Change is part of life, of existence, of common wisdom. I am Earth Seed. Anyone can be. I wonder why it's taken me so long, why there was ever a time when I didn't understand a thing so obvious, so true, and so real. Why is the universe? To shape God. Why is God? To shape the universe. It feels like the truest thing I've ever written. Consider whether you're a human being, an insect, a microbe, or a stone. This verse is true. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Thank you.